You're welcome to the Gavel. I'm Linda Akibe. The Senate finally approved the extension of emergency rule in Borno, Yobe and Adamawa States for another 6 months. This is the second time emergency rule has been extended in these states in nearly 2 years. President Jonathan first proclaimed a state of emergency in the 3 states on May 14, 2013 to address the security challenges in the states from terrorist activities. The emergency rule was later extended in November 2013 for another 6 months. Now, although the Senate approved the extension, the upper chamber made some demands. Let's find out what these demands are.
Those in favor of the motion as read out by the leader of the Senate and seconded by the minority leader, say aye. Again, say nay. The ayes have it.
And this was how the Senate approved the extension of emergency rule in Borno, Yobe and Adamawa States for another 6 months. But not without making some demands from the executive.
Cognizant of the fact that by the provision of Section 305, subsection 6C, which states inter alia, and I quote, provided that the National Assembly may, before the expiration of the period of 6 months aforesaid, extend the period for the proclamation of the state of emergency to remain in force from time to time for a further period of 6 months by a resolution passed in like manner. That this Senate recalls that the Ministers of Defense and Police Affairs, Service Chiefs, the Director General of State Security, Inspector General of Police, and the National Security Advisor had briefed the Senate on the state of security in the affected states. That accordingly, this Senate resolves to approve the extension of the proclamation of the state of emergency as contained in the Emergency Powers General Regulations 2013, effective in Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe states to remain in force for a further period of 6 months in accordance with the terms and conditions, content and context as earlier passed by the National Assembly. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this distinguished Senate, in addition, further welcomes and endorses the support of the international community in respect of efforts to rescue the abducted Chibok students and urge Mr. President to expand the cooperation and collaboration to the overall arrest of the ugly incidents of terrorism in Nigeria. That Senate calls for proper kitting and arming of our armed forces deployed to arrest the insurgency and to ensure adequate welfare for troops. Urge that full military operations be undertaken on a sustained basis to rout the insurgents. That special recruitments into armed forces of screened and vetted youths, particularly those of the civilian JTF, who will receive emergency training and deployed in the trouble zone in order to beef up the strength of our troops and win the hearts and minds of the locals. That the federal government, in conjunction with state governments, come up with an economic Marshall Plan to revive the economies of the affected states, and that the federal government should seek and secure multilateral support for this Marshall Plan. That the Ministers of Defense, Police Affairs, the Service Chiefs, the National Security Advisor, the Director General of State Security Services do report to the Senate on a monthly basis progress made in combating the insurgency, on the basis of which this distinguished Senate can take any decision it considers necessary, including but not limited to the revocation of the declaration of a state of emergency. Urge Mr. President to prepare and submit to the National Assembly supplementary budget to meet any established financial requirements needed to combat the insurgency.
I want to appreciate and thank you for the painstaking discussion that took place and the subsequent approval. Let me also say emphatically here that we have requested that certain issues be resolved as quickly as possible. We stand shoulder to shoulder and strongly behind our colleagues from all the states affected. We take this in the same vein that we are all equally affected and that this is a national issue and not a sectional issue in any form.
This decision to extend emergency rule in the northeast was not easily reached. It took hours of a closed-door meeting between the Senate President and lawmakers, particularly those from the northern states. The Northern Caucus in the Senate last week said its members would vote against the extension of emergency rule in the 3 states because it was not achieving the purpose for which it was declared. It is obvious that an agreement was reached during the talks.
Nothing changed in my mind and nothing changed in my belief that the emergency has failed, and I'm not in support of it 100%. And I do also believe that much remains to be done to achieve this. This is a national disaster which ought to be taken with tact and tactics. Today the Senate, in its wisdom, had decided to approve the emergency with some conditionalities which were read out by the leader of the Senate, and that is the position of the Senate. As a senator, I don't believe in it, I didn't vote for it, but the Senate had taken that decision for which I'm part. Your question, the northern senators did say that they are not going to support the emergency. Yes, indeed, we said that we are not going to support the emergency, and I can put it to you that the northern senators are not behind the state of emergency. The argument have been put between members who come from the affected states and the leadership of the Senate. An agreement was reached that they would consider some conditionalities to attach to the declaration of emergency, and I think that swelled the votes in favor of the state of emergency. And those conditions coming from the leadership, the details of which were reeled out by the Senate leader, I believe probably, if well implemented, could change the situation, so to speak.
After considerable deliberation and discussion, last Thursday, you remember, we agreed that before we do that, there is the need for further consultation. We did a lot of consultation, and we came up that this time, hoping it's going to be the last time there will be extension of the state of emergency. That is one. 2, we passed this time the state of emergency with stringent and specific conditions. Unlike before that we used to pass it blanketly, this time around we pass it with specific, that this should be done, that should be done, and one of it is we are going to be monitoring, not only monitoring, we are going to be reviewing the state of emergency on monthly basis, so that if after a month and we feel that the state of emergency is not needed, we will drop it.
We were not ready to vote for the extension of time. But you see, the basic reason is that we had to put about 9 conditions before we approve this extension of time. 9 conditions are those. One of them, which I could mention, is that the military should be fully equipped, the government of the state should be carried on board, and the federal government should also take care of the finances of this, financing the military and whatever action they're going to do. And also those members of the civilian GTF should be involved. They should screen them and enroll some of them as military officers so that they could be able to help in this fight of insurgents. And also, we said the thing must be finished as soon as possible. The other condition we also gave out is that every month, the military should come and brief us on what is the progress so far they have done. And we have our senators in that constituency, so they also monitor what is happening. So based on that, that's why we have to agree on it.
Billions of naira has been voted for security.
Let me add that trillions have been spent.
For security, and then we've been hearing reports that personnel on ground are not adequately equipped. And we know even APC had even come out to say that we should probe the funds that have been released for the security. Are you not afraid that this same thing will happen?
Part of those conditions we gave out is that the welfare of the officers on the ground should really be taken care of properly. Because there are their allowances. No, but we said every month will be briefed. So which means we are not saying we are going to go into investigation, but we are giving them liberty that they should give us information every month, and we have people on the ground to find out. So definitely we have to enhance the position of the military on the ground, give them their allowances, give them good welfare, give them arms to fight the insurgents, and at the same time also do not put the burden on the cost. And also the president should give a supplementary budget immediately on what will cost, what it takes to cost.
This is the second time emergency rule has been extended in Borno, Yobe and Adamawa States in about 2 years. After all said and done, will this extension make any difference in the fight against terrorism, and would the presidency give in to the demands of the Senate? Only time will tell. When we see people who are victims of terrorist attacks or anarchy, we get a glimpse of despair and helplessness written on your faces or their body language. Many victims in these circumstances have to deal with loss of life of their loved ones and also loss of home, properties, you name it. Well, the House Committee on Human Rights is holding the National Refugees Commission to task in ensuring that they provide shelter and basic needs for survivors of terrorist attacks, particularly in the states worst hit by the crisis.
In cases of terrorism and insurgents, the biggest casualties are usually the people, particularly women and children. With this in mind, the chairman of the House Committee on Human Rights, Benila, has urged the National Refugees Commission to take necessary measures to provide shelter and basic needs for families and survivors of terrorist attacks in Adamawa, Borno and Yobe states. The House Committee on Human Rights met with the Human Rights Commission and NAPTIP to brainstorm on efforts yet to be put in place to ensure that military personnel in the battle areas are well equipped and protected as they continue on the fight to rescue the kidnapped girls.
Nigeria has been united, a very strong, united and peaceful country before now. But we are seeing that this monster that is coming is threatening to destroy the very fabric of our society. It's threatening to destroy our value systems as Nigerians, our democracy. But I know that this is not the acceptable way of life in Nigeria. Nigerians do not accept this, and we will not accept this. Therefore, we will continue to condemn all acts of terrorism, all acts of killings, abduction of children, killing children in schools. This cannot be allowed to continue. The terrorists must not only stop this, but Nigerians must find a way to unite and fight it as Nigerians, as mothers who have children, as fathers who have children.
The National Human Rights Commission has, in a number of other press statements, condemned these security challenges and condemns in absolute terms the wanton destruction of lives and property currently taking place in Nigeria. The Commission is in support of the initiatives being put in place by government to combat terror and all its evil manifestations.
Most of these victims, from what we saw when we went round, was predominantly women, petty traders who were hawking by the roadside there, and then the shop owners and those who are passing. We have a good number of students who are also victims, final year medical students from the University of Jos. And the victims are so many that we have not yet even settled on the number yet.
To effectively tackle terrorism, the National Human Rights Director stressed the need for the provision of modern and state-of-the-art arms and ammunition for the military, police and other security agencies, as well as improved motivation and welfare packages for security operatives involved in the internal security operations.
Is the provision of modern and state-of-the-art arms and ammunition for the military, police and other security agencies. Intensification of capacity development in counter-terrorism strategy for the military, police and other security agencies. Enhancing motivation and the welfare of the security operatives involved in internal security operations.
The director said the National Human Rights Commission is collaborating with various national and international agencies, including the Office of the National Security Advisor and other security agencies on the promotion of human rights in the three troubled states. In her contribution, the Executive Secretary, National Agency for Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, said the agency is interacting with its counterparts in Niger. She explained that it was waiting for the details of the meeting between President Jonathan with his counterparts from Niger, Cameroon, Benin Republic, Chad, and France before taking any decision. A federal lawmaker at the meeting wants the Commission to engage its Cameroonian counterparts more closely in fighting the issue of trafficking.
But NAPTIP is meeting directly with the National Commission in Niger. We have not been able to contact yet the equivalent mechanisms in Chad as well as Cameroon. We had to go through the Ministry of Justice. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is contacting the high commissions and embassies in these countries to ensure that they establish direct contact as soon as possible, considering, of course, the commitments made by the various presidents during the summit in France.
Every time the conversation comes up, the one country that is mentioned loudest is Cameroon. And so while we applaud your engagement and interrogation your engagement with the other countries, I would be a bit more, I'll go to bed easier if indeed Cameroon, you had started to engage with Cameroon in a more collaborative way. Of course, we're all aware that the very infamous Sambisa forest is bordered to the east with the Republic of Cameroon. Now, if that comes up in the narrative all the time when we're talking about, especially, and I'm speaking about Chibok, I think that it is one place that you must concentrate your efforts on.
The chairman of the committee, Representative Bernie Lar, urged the Commission to carry out more conviction of terrorists than it is doing presently. She said that the House would amend the relevant laws to take care of children orphaned by the activities of the insurgents. The committee also reiterated its commitment to give assistance to the agency to fight terrorism in the country.